Hey there, deep divers. It's Julie B, and today I'm diving into the backstory of Harmony Cobel, into which we finally got some massive insight in Season 2, Episode 8, Sweet Vitriol. After several episodes without Cobel, she finally makes her grand return as we discover what she's been up to since she fled Lumon in terror. This episode is the start of what will certainly be Cobel's redemption arc and her forthcoming rebellion against Lumon, joining forces with Mark and Devon. As I've stated in past videos, I've long believed that Cobel is not actually pro-Lumon at all, as evidenced by the lingerie-clad waffle party dancers perverting the original image of the Four Tempers. I think Lumon has perverted the original teachings of Keir in many ways. So while Cobel is a devout believer in that cult, I've theorized that she doesn't like the way that Lumon operates at all, and we get proof of that in this episode. When we last saw Cobel, she was demanding to meet with the board and get her job back. Helena began leading her toward the Lumon building, but then a terrifying-looking man stared down Cobel as she fled, clearly recognizing that her life is now in danger. She has become an enemy of Lumon at this point, cast out of the cult of Keir, and that puts her life in jeopardy. They recognize how brilliant she is, and that's what makes her so dangerous to them. And she must know all too well what Lumon is capable of, how they can make people disappear when they want to. Just look at Gemma, and Petey, who was running for his life from Lumon in Season 1 after reintegrating. So Cobel flees to her hometown of Saltz, where she goes on a mission to find a piece of her past. In the process, we see the human side of Cobel more than ever before. Beneath her ice-cold exterior, she carries deep trauma, grief, and pain. She's been brainwashed and indoctrinated into the cult of Keir since she was a child, and now that she's been cast out of it, she's finally realized how much damage Lumon has really done. No one is born a villain. As Mary Shelley said, monsters are not born, they are made. Cobel has behaved like a monster toward the severed workers, but we can see how she was a victim of Lumon and this cult herself, and the trauma she went through as a child shaped her into who she is today. The fact that Cobel is the victim of a cult indoctrination was already strongly implied since Season 1, with Cobel essentially worshipping in front of a shrine to Keir in her living room. As part of the shrine, there was a breathing tube with the name Charlotte Cobel and a birth date of 1944, so most fans deduced that this must have belonged to her mother, who must have died in a tragic way, and this episode finally confirms it. We also get confirmation that Cobel indeed went to the Myrtle Egan School for Girls, as evidenced by the picture of a young girl in pigtails in that shrine in Season 1, a copy of which is also in this episode, in the bedroom of Cobel's late mother. The episode title has a dual meaning. Sweet oil of vitriol is an archaic name for diethyl ether, and Lumon got its start with this ether mill in the town where Harmony Cobel grew up, which she revisits in this episode. But more importantly, vitriol means cruel and bitter criticism. And there is plenty of that going on between Harmony and a family member who apparently raised her when her mother died. I'm assuming this is her aunt, Sissy Cobel. The town of Salt's Neck is a dilapidated mess of crumbling buildings and dirt roads. Apparently, Lumon destroyed this town, like many money-hungry companies that don't care about the human cost of their practices. We get a glimpse into the tragic way of life in this town, with images such as a homeless man and this old woman who wears a breathing tube. In the background, we can hear the Keir hymn in the musical score, slowed down in a mournful style to underscore the damage that the cult did to this town. Harmony shows up at a diner to see a childhood friend, Hampton, and mentions how the town is older and frailer than she remembers. She had already been enraged by Lumon's rejection of her and running for her life from them, so she already had enough motivation for a vendetta against them. Seeing the damage that it's done to her hometown in person brings the truth even more into focus for Cobel, as she's starting to get deprogrammed from this cult at last. She asks Hampton to meet her at the ether factory because she needs a favor, which he does. Faded Lumon globe logo can be seen on the building, the ether mill where Keir and Imogene first met, and where Cobel and Hampton worked together as children. Cobel asks him to drive her to Sissy's house, saying, "If they're watching the house, they'll recognize my car." So clearly she is acutely aware that her life is in jeopardy. Hampton says that Sissy still lives by the 9, meaning Kier's 9 principles, and he says that's made her a pariah here, so this means the town has rejected the cult of Kier, as it's been so severely damaged by it. Hampton himself is extremely disdainful of Lumon and the cult, full of bitterness about being put through child labor and seeing his town ravaged by the company over time. He's also an ether addict, as is most of the town apparently, thanks to Lumon. Reluctantly, he agrees to help Cobel, driving her to Sissy's house as she hides in his pickup truck bed, and then he waits outside to stand guard for Lumon people. Despite his resentment toward Cobel and her involvement with Lumon, he seems to have a soft spot for her based on their history together as child laborers, so he can't resist helping her. Arriving at the house, Sissy tells Cobel that she's not welcome there, but Cobel barges in anyway and runs upstairs to her childhood bedroom. Almost everything is gone, to her utter shock. She passes by a plaque on the wall that was an award for Sissy related to her work as a youth apprentice. So apparently she was also a child laborer, and this practice has likely been going on since the beginning of Lumon. Recall that in the story of Dieter Egan from episode 4, we heard that Kier told his brother Dieter that they needed to return to work at the ether mill, despite their young age. Sissy coldly tells Cobel that she sold her things to the poor, and admits that Drummond has called, but doesn't divulge what he said, just asking Cobel what she has done. Cobel demands the key to her mother's room, and Sissy replies that the room stays shut until all who remember her sit with Kier. This must be some strange practice of their cult. As Cobel continues to demand the key, Sissy asks, "Why do you bring nothing but woe into my life?" Woe, of course, being one of the 4 tempers. Retorting that Sissy is the one who curses this house with woe, she accuses Sissy of killing her mother, Charlotte, by pulling the breathing tube out of her. After slapping Cobel, Sissy claims there was gratitude in Charlotte's eyes to be freed from her suffering, and thinks that if Charlotte had been a believer, aka a follower of Kier, then maybe she would have found solace in the 9, meaning the 9 principles of Kier, of course. So it seems that Charlotte was so sick when Harmony was a child that Sissy took charge of making the decisions regarding Harmony and must have been responsible for sending her to the Egan School for Girls, where she was brainwashed into the cult of Kier and sent to work at the ether mill at such a young age. Harmony shows a rare moment of vulnerability as she says that she would have cared for her mother herself if she hadn't been in school, and she didn't even get to say goodbye before her mother died. Sissy insists that Harmony belonged in school, saying, "Mr. Egan saw Kier in you, and the Wintertide Fellowship even at the factory. No apprentice was more industrious than you." And then she says that Harmony turned out to be such a disappointment. Incidentally, this is the same fellowship that Ms. Wong has now, except she's working in the Lumon office instead of an ether factory. This is a yearbook that Harmony finds later in this episode commemorating her fellowship as a child. Refusing to divulge what Drummond had said to her, Sissy just tells Harmony what a disappointment she's turned out to be and says she needs to return and plead forgiveness from the Egans. Since Sissy won't give her the key to her mother's room, Harmony runs up to Sissy's room and searches for it amongst her things. Inside there is a shrine to Kier with his picture, figurines of the 4 tempers, cards with the 9 principles on them, and a lot more. Finding the key, Harmony enters her mother's bedroom and it's mostly empty, with moth-eaten raggedy clothes in the closet, a picture of Harmony as a child on a shelf, and a machine that Charlotte had used with her breathing tube when she was ill. In a heartbreaking scene, Harmony lays down on the bed and breathes through her mother's breathing tube while crying, staying there for what must have been hours as night falls. To be honest, I really didn't need any of these scenes to already feel sympathy for Cobel. It was already clear to me that she had been a victim of this cult, indoctrinated into it as a child and racked with grief over the loss of her mother, since that breathing tube had been planted as a clue in season 1. Anyway, Hampton barges into the house and comes to find Harmony eventually when she doesn't come out. She says that she needs to find something but won't say what it is. Hampton says he liked Charlotte, Harmony's mother, even though he didn't know her well. He says that she hated Lumon even more than he did, and that's all he needed to know. So not only was Charlotte not part of the Kier cult, but she actually hated Lumon. They get high on ether together, which real-life people used to do in the 1800s at parties, called ether frolics, which is fitting since frolic is one of Kier's 4 tempers in the show. Harmony says she hadn't done that since she was 8, which is horrifying. Not only was she doing child labor, but also drug use at such a young age. Apparently, she and Hampton had a pretty close relationship because they spend a lot of time staring into each other's eyes in this episode, and eventually they even kiss. Then Harmony gets an idea saying she wouldn't throw it out, referring to Sissy and this item that she's been searching for frantically. So they go outside to a root cellar, and Harmony goes inside with a lantern. After rooting around in there, she finds a bust of Kier's head, which indeed is something that a devout believer in the cult like Sissy would never throw out. And inside, Harmony finds her old notebook, which is full of her designs and calculations for the invention of the Lumon chip. A huge reveal that Cobel is actually a genius who was responsible for this groundbreaking invention, not James Egan. All this time, we've been led to believe that James Egan invented the chip, as he had taken credit for it. So this reveal is a huge game changer. Even Harmony seems to have repressed the memory that she in fact invented this technology, because she was so drunk on the Kier Kool-Aid from that brainwashing. Re-entering the house, Harmony tells Sissy not to reveal to Lumon's people that she was there, but Sissy refuses to lie to as steward of the Egans for Harmony. With the reality of this memory fully hitting her that she, in fact, was the one who designed the chip technology, Harmony finally lets her true feelings about Lumon out, declaring, Lumon destroyed this town, and says that Sissy owes them no loyalty. Sissy, in turn, retorts that there was no town before the factory and says that everything Harmony has, she owes back to the Egans as fealty. In response, Cobel snaps, shoving her notebook at Sissy and showing her the contents of it, screaming, Mine, my designs, circuit blueprint, base code, overtime contingency, Glasgow block, all of it. James Egan had taken credit for the invention, but Harmony says she never told anyone because she had been told that Kier's knowledge was for all, and if she sought credit, she'd be banished. And Harmony's been so brainwashed from the cult from such a young age that she went along with this, keeping her mouth shut while James Egan took credit for her invention and profited from it immensely. So it seems that now her eyes are finally being opened to the injustice of Kier's cult, aside from her anger toward Lumon as a company for rejecting her in the way that they did. As Sissy tries to throw the notebook into the fire, Harmony snatches it back and goes to leave. Sissy tells her that Charlotte, her mother, was the one who removed her own breathing tube, cruelly calling her mother a coward, more sick in the soul than in the body, filled with malice and resentment. The emotional abuse that Harmony must have endured as a child from this vile woman is clear, as Sissy tells her, I thought you were different, my flower. I tried to help you grow, but now I see you are a weed, just as she was. At this point, Hampton yells from outside that a car is approaching and sends Harmony off in his pickup truck, staying behind to face down the Lumon people so that she can get away safely. Now, in the new opening credits of season 2, there's a car that looks exactly like Cobel's crashing into icy water, and I believe this is a clue, like the rest of the images in the opening credit sequence. So I'm sure Hampton will crash Harmony's car into the icy water running along the town of Saltz, buying Harmony some time and perhaps making the Lumon people think that she died. As Harmony drives out of town, she finally answers a call from Devon, who's been trying to reach her for the entire episode, and Devon tells her that Mark has reintegrated. Harmony responds, Ragabi? And she hasn't killed him yet? Thus, she seems horrified, not confident in Ragabi's abilities. And frankly, I'm not either. Ragabi acted like a mad scientist and disregarded the risks to Mark's safety, making that hasty decision to flood the chip in his brain. Devon says she thinks Mark is okay, but they want to try something else. Cobel asks her to put Mark on the phone, and she says, "Tell me everything." To be honest, it's surprising that Devon would be so quick to take the risk of telling Cobel what's going on, but she's in a desperate situation and afraid that Mark could die. She can't bring him to a hospital because Lumon has people on the payroll all over town. I think Devon should have had a longer conversation with Harmony before blurting out that Mark has been reintegrated, but I understand that she's assuming Harmony will be on their side at this point. As the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Devon is aware that Lumon has cast out Cobel. So it's clear now that Cobel is going to be an ally to Mark in the resistance efforts against Lumon. It seems that she's ready to come back now with a vengeance, finally ready to deprogram from this cult of Kier. And I predict that she'll be much more effective at helping Mark and keeping him alive than Ragabi would have been. With the bombshell reveal that Harmony is the one who invented the chip, it's likely that she will have the best chance at keeping Mark alive and getting him through the rest of the reintegration process. In my opinion, Harmony Cobel is the most formidable character on this show, and she will now become Lumen's worst nightmare, since they've now made her into an enemy. It's a mammoth task to deprogram oneself from a cult, but I believe that Cobel is well on her way to achieving that now. Now, I've got to be honest about something. In my opinion, this was the weakest episode of Severance to date, and not up to the usual superb standard of this exquisite series, one of the best series I have ever seen. The excessive melodrama of Cobel's backstory was not necessary to establish sympathy for her character, in my opinion. We already had enough information to feel compassion for Cobel, even though it had been presented to us in a more subtle way. While the writing in this episode was not up to par, in my opinion, of course the episode is saved by Patricia Arquette's incredible acting as always, the always gorgeous cinematography, and the excellent direction by Ben Stiller. So now I want to know what you think. Is Cobel trustworthy now? Will she become an ally to Mark and a crusader against Lumon? Let me know your thoughts and theories down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and check out my deep dive lives on Mondays at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. And until next time, keep on deep diving, and let's see what we can uncover together.